The courtroom door slammed shut, and every head turned. A black man in a worn jacket stood alone, his eyes locked on the judge's bench, unyielding under the weight of 100 stares. Before he could speak, Judge Harlan's voice thundered, "You think you can waltz in here and disrespect this court?" The air grew heavy, thick with the kind of silence that chokes a room. Marcus Tate, the man at the center of the storm, didn't flinch. He wasn't just any defendant, was a U.S. Marshal, undercover, his badge hidden beneath the frayed fabric of his disguise. But no one in the courtroom knew that. Not yet. To them, he was just another face, another name on a docket, another black man standing in a place where assumptions came before truth. And Judge Harlan, a man known for his iron gavel and sharper tongue, was ready to make an example of him. The case was simple on paper, a bar fight, a broken bottle, a charge of assault. But nothing about this moment was simple. Marcus had been working a sting operation, tracking a drug ring that operated out of the small-town bar. He'd played his part too well, blending in, looking rough, staying quiet. Too quiet, it seemed, for the judge's liking. Harlan's face reddened as he leaned forward, his voice dripping with disdain. "Speak up, boy. You think silence is going to save you?" The word "boy" landed like a slap. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. A woman in the back row clutched her purse, her eyes wide. A young lawyer at the prosecution table shifted uncomfortably, his pen frozen mid-note. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his gaze stayed steady, cutting through the judge's bluster like a blade. He'd heard worse. He'd lived worse. Growing up in a neighborhood where cops saw his skin before his name, Marcus had learned early how to carry himself through a world quick to judge. But this? This was a performance, and he was playing a role, one that demanded he stay silent, even as every fiber of him burned to speak. "Your Honor," Marcus finally said, his voice low but firm, "I'm here to answer the charges." He kept his hands still, clasped in front of him, betraying nothing. Not the weight of the badge in his pocket. Not the years of service that had taken him from street patrols to covert ops. Not the sting of knowing that, to this judge, he was just a stereotype in a docket sheet. Harlan scoffed, slamming his gavel. "Answer? You call that an answer? I've seen your type troublemakers who think they're above the law." The judge's words weren't just for Marcus, they were for the room, for the reporters scribbling in the back, for the town that had already made up its mind about the thug from the bar fight. Marcus felt the eyes on him, the weight of their assumptions pressing harder than the cuffs he'd worn for show when they brought him in. The prosecutor, a young man named Ellis, stood, adjusting his tie nervously. "Your Honor, the defendant is charged with assault and disorderly conduct. Witnesses claim he started the altercation unprovoked." Ellis glanced at Marcus, his expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He'd seen the bar's security footage, grainy, inconclusive. Something about the case felt off, but he couldn't place it. Marcus's lawyer, a public defender named Clara, rose to her feet. She was older, her hair streaked with gray, her voice steady despite the tension. "Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. The prosecution's case relies on biased accounts and lacks evidence of intent." She shot a pointed look at the judge, daring him to dismiss her. Clara had seen too many cases like this, men like Marcus judged before they even opened their mouths. She'd fought those battles her whole career, and she wasn't about to back down now. Harlan waved her off. "Save it, Ms. Thompson. I've heard enough excuses." His eyes locked back on Marcus. "You've got one chance to explain yourself before I decide your fate. Don't waste it." The room held its breath. Marcus's mind raced, weighing his options. He could reveal his identity now, pull the badge from his pocket, and watch the judge's face collapse in embarrassment. But that would blow his cover, unravel months of work, and let the real criminals slip away. The drug ring was bigger than this courtroom, bigger than Harlan's ego. Lives were at stake, dealers who didn't care who they hurt, kids caught in the crossfire. Marcus had seen too many operations fail because someone spoke too soon. He couldn't risk it. I was defending myself, Marcus said, his voice calm but edged with steel. The other guy came at me first. I didn't start anything. It was the truth, or close enough. The bar fight had been staged, a way to get Marcus closer to the ring's inner circle. But the man who'd swung at him hadn't known that. To him, Marcus was just another mark, someone to rough up for show. Harlan's laugh was sharp, cutting. Defending yourself? You expect me to believe that? He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. I've seen your recorder lack of one. No job, no address, just a drifter causing trouble. You think you can lie to me? The accusation stung, but Marcus kept his face neutral. No record. That was by design. His real identity was buried deep, scrubbed from public view to protect his work. To Harlan, that absence was proof of guilt. To Marcus, it was just another day on the job. Clara stepped forward, her voice rising. Your Honor, you're making assumptions without evidence. My client has rights, and this court has a duty to fairness. Her words were a challenge, one that made Harlan's eyes narrow. Fairness, he snapped. I'll show you fairness when he shows me respect. The gavel slammed again, and the room flinched. The tension was a living thing now, coiling tighter with every word. Spectators whispered, their voices a low hum of judgment and curiosity. A reporter in the back scribbled furiously, sensing a story that would sell papers. Marcus's pulse quickened, but he kept his composure. He'd been in worse spots undercover in a dealer's den, staring down a gun, knowing one wrong move could end him. This was different, though. This wasn't just about survival, it was about justice, about a system that saw his skin and stopped looking. He wanted to shout it, to tell them who he really was, to make them see. But he couldn't. Not yet. Ellis, the prosecutor, cleared his throat. Your Honor, perhaps we should review the evidence before proceeding. The footage. Enough. Harlan cut him off. I don't need grainy videos to know what happened. I've got a room full of witnesses who saw this man start a fight. That's all I need. His gaze bore into Marcus, daring him to argue. Clara's hands clenched at her sides. Your Honor, you're rushing to judgment. This is a miscarriage of justice. Her voice shook, not with fear but with anger. She'd seen this before too many times. A judge deciding guilt before the trial even began, a system stacked against men like Marcus. She wouldn't let it happen again. The courtroom was a powder keg, every word a spark. Marcus stood at its center, the weight of his secret heavier than ever. He could feel the eyes, the assumptions, the history of a world that judged him before it knew him. But he also felt something else resolve. He'd spent his life fighting for justice, not just for himself but for everyone who'd been written off, dismissed, dehumanized. This moment, this courtroom, was just another battle. And then it happened. A man in the back row stood, his face pale, his hands trembling. Your Honor, I was there, he said, his voice cracking. At the bar. He didn't start it. I saw the whole thing. The room froze. Harlan's gavel hovered midair. Clara's head snapped toward the man, her eyes wide. Marcus didn't move, but his heart pounded. The man, a wiry bartender with a nervous tick, stepped forward. The other guy swung first. This manha was just trying to stop it. Murmurs erupted, a wave of shock rolling through the crowd. Harlan's face twisted, caught between disbelief and fury. You expect me to take your word over sworn statements, he barked. It's the truth, the bartender said, his voice steadier now. I didn't come forward before because I was scared. But I can't let this happen. He's not who you think. Marcus's eyes met the bartender's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He didn't know the man, hadn't planned for this. But something in the bartender's face, guilt, maybe, or a flicker of courage had shifted the tide. Clara seized the moment. Your Honor, this changes everything. We need to hear this witness's testimony, properly, under oath. Her voice was a blade, sharp and unyielding. Harlan's jaw worked, his authority challenged in a way he hadn't expected. He looked at Marcus, then at the bartender, then back to Marcus. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. "Fine," he said, his voice tight. "We'll recess and reconvene tomorrow. But don't think this changes anything until I say it does." The gavel fell, and the room exhaled. Marcus was led out, his hands still cuffed for show, his heart racing with a mix of relief and tension. The truth was creeping closer, but he wasn't out of the woods yet. His cover held, but the operation hung by a thread. And in a small town where whispers traveled faster than truth, he knew the real fight was just beginning. As the courtroom emptied, Clara caught up to him in the hallway, her voice low. "You're holding something back," she said, her eyes searching his. "I don't know what, but I know you're not just some guy caught in a bar fight." Marcus met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Just do your job, Clara," he said softly. "I'll do mine." She nodded, a spark of respect in her eyes. "I will. But you'd better be ready for tomorrow. Harlan's not done with you." Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the courthouse steps. Marcus felt the weight of his badge, still hidden, still a secret. Tomorrow, he'd face the judge again. Tomorrow, the truth might come out or it might bury him. But for now, he walked forward, one step at a time, carrying the hope that justice, however slow, however flawed, could still prevail. The courthouse buzzed with tension as the next morning dawned. Word of the bartender's outburst had spread like wildfire through the small town, fueling whispers and debates in diners, barbershops, and social media threads. Some called it a travesty, others a setup. To most, Marcus Tate was still just a name, a face, a man whose story didn't add up. But to those who'd seen his calm defiance in the courtroom, he was something more, a challenge to the status quo. Inside, the courtroom was packed tighter than the day before. Reporters jostled for seats, their cameras trained on the judge's bench. Spectators leaned forward, some with folded arms, others clutching notepads. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation and unease. Marcus stood at the defendant's table, his hands uncuffed now, his expression as steady as ever. Clara, his lawyer, stood beside him, her briefcase open, papers neatly stacked. She'd spent the night digging, piecing together fragments of the bar fight, chasing leads that didn't quite connect. She knew Marcus was hiding something, but she trusted her gut was no criminal. Judge Harlan entered, his robes sweeping behind him like a storm cloud. His face was a mask of control, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. The bartender's testimony had shaken him, if only slightly. He'd built his career on certainty, on the weight of his gavel, but now the ground felt less solid. "Order," he barked, slamming the gavel before anyone could speak. "We're here to get to the truth, not to entertain rumors." Clara didn't waste a second. "Your Honor, I call Mr. Daniel Hayes, the bartender, to the stand." Her voice was clear, cutting through the murmurs. The wiry man from the day before shuffled forward, his hands fidgeting but his chin raised. He swore the oath, his voice quieter than yesterday but no less resolute. "Mr. Hayes," Clara began, "tell us what you saw at the bar that night." Hayes cleared his throat, glancing at Marcus. "It was busy, loud. This guy Mr. Tate was at the bar, keeping to himself. Another guy, big, drunk, started mouthing off. Called him names. Racial stuff. Then he swung a bottle. Mr. Tate blocked it, pushed him back. That's it. He didn't start nothing." The room stirred. A woman in the third row whispered to her neighbor, her eyes wide. A reporter's pen scratched furiously. Harlan's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt, not yet. Clara pressed on. "And why didn't you come forward sooner?" Hayes looked down, his shoulders slumping. I was scared. The guy who started it, he's got friends. Rough types. I didn't want trouble. He paused, then met Clara's eyes. But I couldn't stay quiet. Not after seeing how this was going. The prosecutor, Ellis, stood for cross-examination, his tie still slightly crooked. Mr. Hayes, you're saying you saw everything, but you didn't report it to the police that night. Why should we trust your story now? Hayes bristled. Because I'm here, ain't I? I'm telling the truth. You got the footage, check it. Ellis hesitated, then nodded. We'll get to that. He sat down, his confidence wavering. The security footage, grainy as it was, had been reviewed overnight. It showed a scuffle, but the angles were bad, the faces unclear. It didn't prove Marcus guilty, but it didn't clear him either. Harlan leaned forward, his voice sharp. Mr. Tate, you've heard the witness. Care to add anything, or are you still playing the silent game? Marcus took a breath, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. His cover was still intact, but the operation was teetering. The drug ring's leaders were watching, he was sure of it, maybe even in this courtroom, disguised as spectators. One wrong move, and months of work would collapse. But the bartender's testimony had shifted the tide, given him a narrow window to push back without breaking character. Your Honor, Marcus said, his voice steady, I told you I was defending myself. Mr. Hayes is telling the truth. The other guy came at me. I didn't want to fight, but I wasn't going to let him hurt me or anyone else. Harlan's eyes narrowed. You expect me to believe you're just an innocent bystander? No record, no job, no ties to this town. You're hiding something, Mr. Tate. Clara shot to her feet. Objection. The court is badgering my client without evidence. This is a trial, not a witch hunt. The room gasped. Harlan's face reddened, his gavel trembling in his hand. Ms. Thompson, you're out of line. One more outburst, and you're in contempt. Clara didn't blink. Then hold me in contempt, Your Honor, but I won't stand by while you railroad my client based on prejudice. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Prejudice. Whispers erupted, louder now, impossible to ignore. A man in the back stood, clapping slowly, defiantly. Others joined, a scattered applause that felt like a rebellion. Harlan slammed his gavel, again and again, his voice roaring. Order. I will have order. But the room was slipping from his control. Marcus saw if cracks in Harlan's authority, the doubt in the spectators' eyes, the weight of a moment that was bigger than one man, one case. He felt it too, the pull to reveal himself, to end this farce. But he couldn't. Not yet. The drug ring was too close, their leader too slippery. He'd spent months building trust, earning his place in their world. One wrong word, and it would all unravel. Ellis stood again, sensing the chaos. Your Honor, I move to admit the security footage into evidence. It may not be perfect, but it's the best we have. Harlan grunted, waving a hand. Fine. Show it. The courtroom dimmed as a projector flickered to life. The footage played on a screen, grainy and jagged. It showed the bar, crowded, chaotic. A large man identified as the instigator lunged at Marcus, bottle in hand. Marcus dodged, pushed him back, and then stepped away. The fight ended as quickly as it began. No punches thrown, no blood spilled. Just a man defending himself. The room was silent as the screen went dark. Ellis cleared his throat. Your Honor, the footage corroborates Mr. Hayes's testimony. It appears Mr. Tate acted in self-defense. Harlan's face was unreadable, his fingers drumming on the bench. Self-defense, he muttered, as if tasting the word. And yet, Mr. Tate, you still haven't explained who you are. No one just walks into my courtroom with no history. Marcus's heart pounded. This was the moment where he could tip the scales or lose everything. He glanced at Clara, who gave him a slight nod, as if sensing his turmoil. He took a breath, then spoke, his voice calm but resonant. "Your Honor, I'm a man who's spent his life trying to do what's right. I don't have a record because I've worked hard to keep it that way. But if you're asking who I am, I'm someone who believes in justice even when it's hard to find." The words landed softly, but they carried weight. The room stilled, the spectators leaning forward, some nodding, others wiping tears. Harlan stared, his certainty shaken. For the first time, he saw Marcus not as a defendant, but as a man. Clara seized the moment. "Your Honor, in light of the testimony and footage, I move for dismissal of all charges." Ellis didn't object. He couldn't. The evidence was clear, the tide had turned. Harlan's eyes darted around the room, taking in the faces, the cameras, the weight of a moment that would define his legacy. He raised his gavel, then paused. "Mr. Tate," he said, his voice quieter now, "I don't know your story. But I know this court owes you fairness. Charges dismissed." The gavel fell, and the room erupted. Cheers, gasps, a few angry mutters. Marcus exhaled, his shoulders easing for the first time in days. Clara grabbed his arm, her eyes shining. "You did it," she whispered. "Not yet," Marcus said, his voice low. He slipped his hand into his pocket, feeling the badge. The real work was still ahead. As the crowd spilled out, Marcus lingered, watching the reporters swarm Harlan, who looked smaller now, diminished. The bartender, Hayes, approached, his face sheepish. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner," he said. I couldn't let it happen again." Marcus nodded. "You did the right thing. That's what matters." Outside, the sun was high, the air warm with the promise of summer. Marcus walked down the courthouse steps, free but not finished. That night, he'd meet his contact, pass on the intel he'd gathered, and bring the drug ring one step closer to justice. But for now, he let himself feel the moment the weight of a system that had almost failed him, and the hope that it could still change. The town would talk about this for years, the day a judge's bias was laid bare, the day a black man stood tall and won. Some would call it a victory, others a scandal. But Marcus knew the truth was messier, harder, and worth fighting for. He'd keep fighting, badge or no badge, because justice wasn't just a word, it was a promise. What do you think, was justice served, or was this just one battle in a larger war? Share your thoughts on right, wrong, and the fight for fairness in a world quick to judge.